Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Childless Not by Choice. Before we get started, I would like to thank my sponsors and my supporters. First, I would like to thank Morgan Air Conditioning, Sales, Service, and Installation, serving Tampa, Florida, and the surrounding areas. Morgan Air can be reached by calling 813-500-7765. That's 813-500-7765. Thank you, Morgan Air, for recognizing the vision of Childless Not by Choice and being a part of it. And thank you for all your work in the community. Next, I would like to thank Alba Digital Media for creating my website, www.childlessnotbychoice.net, and for producing this podcast. To contact Alba Digital Media for your web building and podcast production needs, visit www.albadigitalmedia.com. That's www.albadigitalmedia.com. Thank you, Alba Digital Media, for making me look good and sound good. Finally, I would like to thank Devoted, the musical duo who created my theme music. Thank you, Devoted, for your beautiful music and your awesome talent. To contact Devoted for your music needs, email devotedministries@gmail.com. That's devotedministries@gmail.com. And if you would like to become a one-time or ongoing sponsor of Childless Not by Choice, please contact me at Civilla@CivillaMorgan.com. That's Civilla@CivillaMorgan.com. Thank you so much for listening, and now on to the show. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the broken hearts of childless not by choice women and men around the world. I'm spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, although we did not have the children we so wanted. Thank you for allowing me to sit with you for just another little while. And if you are a first-time visitor here, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you are a repeat listener, thank you so very much. And I know that you're telling your friends all about the platform and all about this podcast. Thank you so much. Well, today is a special episode because this is the month of July 2017, so this is not going to be exactly 100% evergreen episode, but this is my celebration month. So in honor of celebrating 2 years of podcasting, I have a special guest. Today with me, well, not quite with me because he's 5 hours ahead of me on the other side of the world, is my podcast producer. He's the person that makes me sound good and look good on podcasting and on my website, which we will get into a little bit more in just a few minutes. So here today with me is my podcast producer, Kevin Scullion, the one and only. Hi, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Hi, Civilla. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me on, and happy 2-year anniversary, and also happy Independence Day.
Well, thank you.
I believe.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. We are actually recording on the 4th of July. So thank you on both counts. And I keep telling people that I could not do this without you, this podcasting gig, because I'm not that techie to make the end result sound as good as you make it. So I just want to thank you publicly for just really being there for me as my podcast producer and web builder. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I enjoy doing it, so.
Well, wonderful. Because I'm not always the best listener when it comes to getting things done. So it takes a level of patience, which you have. So moving right along, Kevin, tell us, how did you get into podcasting? Because you are a podcaster yourself.
Well, so they say. I'm probably a bit pod faded at the moment. I've only put one episode out in the last maybe 18 months or so. But yeah, I've got a podcast, and I discovered podcasting, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I got a really good opportunity to step off the hamster wheel and get out and enjoy life without any work. And I decided to wander around Scotland. I live in Scotland, and I love the scenery and I love the solitude, and I like visiting some of the more remote parts of the country. And like a lot of people, I'd discovered smartphones and iPhones, and I'd found the iPhone app for podcasting. And I was thinking, well, I'm often outside the range of mobile phones, and perhaps there's a podcast or two that I could download in the phone and listen to while I'm traveling. And that just got me interested in podcasts, and I was really impressed with the range of podcasts, the different subjects, and some of the content, the people that I began to listen to. And an obvious thing I thought was, well, I'll look and see if I can find some podcasts about Scotland and travel, and there wasn't really anything in Scotland, and that led to me thinking, well, maybe I should do a podcast myself. I've always been into all the techie side of the internet and things, so it sort of sprung from that idea, really.
And just like many of us who are in the space of entrepreneurship and trying to build a brand and build a platform, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. I don't know if they say that in Scotland.
I partly recognise it. I certainly know the sentiment of it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you started podcasting around Scotland, but you're downplaying it by saying that you've only posted one episode in the last 18 months, which is true, but you have many episodes and you have many downloads. We don't have to get into that, but you have tons of downloads and listeners and people visiting Scotland because they've heard your podcast.
Yeah, you're making me feel guilty now, Civilla, because I think I started, say, 4 years ago, and I've probably got a similar number of episodes to you. And when I was really on forum and going, podcasting every week, I had a lot of people get in touch over time. In fact, that's probably one of the most exciting parts of it. I'd started out, I'm a bit of an amateur photographer, and I'd been taking photographs and putting them to music and making videos for YouTube, mainly as a record, but as a reference for friends and family to have a look. And I was looking at the downloads thinking, well, it's probably only over a year, maybe 100, 200 people downloading these videos. And when I looked at the analytics, they weren't really watching the whole video. That was the top headline number. Quite a few people were just popping in for a few seconds and heading off. So the big discovery with podcasting was when I started listening to podcasts, I got addicted to certain podcasters, their voice and their content, and I really look forward each week or fortnight for the next one coming out. So when I started podcasting, I was just amazed at the sort of how much the engagement started to take place. People started to get in touch and send me emails and messages of encouragement, and it really took off from there. So although I haven't been podcasting properly for about, say, 18 months, I've really started to get back into it recently, hence the episode last month.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like I have an obligation to people who are not only previous listeners or were regular listeners, but even now people are still discovering the back catalogue, listening to the 50, 60 episodes, and then asking the question, when's the next one coming out? And I've been stuck at home for a year or two. There's life circumstances have meant that I haven't been out travelling as much as I'd like, so I haven't been as relaxed or keen to do the episodes I would normally be if I was out and about. So,
well, we all of us look forward to you coming back. We know life happens, but I personally have listened to every single episode and enjoyed every single one. And so all of your listeners are just waiting for you to come back when we know that you'll be back when it's time, when it's the right time.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I've been doing podcast production throughout that intervening period. That's part of the reason I've been at home. I've been doing more and more web design and podcast production. So ironically, I've been producing podcasts, probably a few hundred in the intervening period, but just not my own.
Exactly. That's one of the things we're going to talk about, because you do produce podcasts for other podcasters and you build websites for people. So tell us a little bit more about how you do that.
Well, again, the background there is I've been on the internet since, well, not since it started, it feels like it, but certainly for 20 years or over 20 years. And I've always been into the techie side. So I really started in the early days. You had to have some technical knowledge to get onto dial-up modem to create a website, and I started there as a hobby. Really, I had some background in electronics and electrical engineering at as a teenager when I was at college. So I was always into technology. So I just self-taught, if you like. I've always had websites, and I've always been building websites. And over the years, I've just kept up to date with the latest, developments in terms of the technology. And I've ended up, when it comes to podcasting, there are so many people who, like yourself, Civilla, who are really, passionate about their topic, and best use of time is really to consider their content and engage with their listeners, and sometimes the technical side. And it's actually, once you're into it, people who do podcasting say it's not that difficult, but it can be at the outset. It can feel like so many different things to do that I just felt I could easily provide that service to people. And I probably enjoy the audio production and podcast production more than I do producing websites. So I've ended up producing other people's podcasts both as a hobby, but as almost like a small income stream to help me with my travels and to keep things. There's always costs in life, even when you're living a frugal lifestyle out and about, and if you like, in a camper van. So.
Right, because you do drive around Scotland in your we call it a motorhome here in the U.S., and you call it camper van. I've had to learn so many different terminologies over the last couple of years of befriending you and just working together. So it's like learning another language, although we both speak English. It's been pretty funny.
Well, we're 10 minutes in, and probably most listeners are just tuning into my accent, just beginning to get the sense of what I'm saying. So.
They're probably just getting used to it, but I'm really used to it. But it's just the words now. Some of the words that are just really, we just get a good laugh sometimes. But you say that you prefer producing podcasts to making websites, but I really love the website that you built for me for the childlessnotbychoice.net for that platform.
Yeah, I mean the tools that are available now for websites and the effects that you can produce are really good. The bandwidth that we all have. I mean, I'm sitting here on fiber optic broadband. You've got 4G, 5G on mobile phones. You're able to stream videos and do all sorts of interesting things on your website in a way that wasn't really practical in the early days. So there's no reason why you can't have a good looking website that does a lot for you in terms of videos and podcasting and all sorts of things if you want to have that.
And people tend to think that building a good website or producing a podcast can be way sky high, and that's not to downplay that it does take time. And of course, people want to be paid for producing podcasts and building websites. But whenever people ask me about who produces my website or produces my podcast or built my website, I tell them to get in contact with you and, not to let the thoughts of prices get in the way, because, they just really need to talk to you. And if so many people have been taken for granted and money taken that did not need to be taken from them, that they become afraid.
Yeah, and I think if people are doing it on a hobby basis or on a startup basis, they might hope to monetize at some point. Then I'm willing to price sensibly. I call it situational pricing. So I'm not looking to make a lot of money off of people. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy giving something back to podcasters because it's a fantastic place to be involved in, because there's so many people out there who have something to say, have expertise, have an interest, a hobby, or a subject, an important subject like your own, and they can share it with other people, and a community can evolve from there, and so much can happen from it that if it's really good to see other podcasters maybe concentrate on the things that they want to do rather than get caught up in the technical side, because the key thing for the podcaster and the listener is that the audio and the show itself is good enough, that the production standards aren't getting in the way of the enjoyment or the listening. So you can get to good enough pretty quickly. And if you're busy and that becomes a continual challenge, you can always give it to somebody like me who'll do it for you.
Exactly. So speaking of that, in a way, podcasting is a great resource. It's a great way to get the word out about your platform. And so tell us, how you feel about it. You kind of touched on it, how it can be such a great resource, especially if you just let it go and know the things you cannot do and let a professional produce for you.
Well, as I say, when I was talking about those videos on YouTube, a very limited audience for that type of video and virtually no real feedback. The odd comment here and there, But when I came to podcasting, my experience in the internet for 20 years, or maybe not 20 years, 15 years to that point, had been that we always, certainly in Europe, hid behind a nickname, if you like, a username online. We never really considered disclosing our identity. And when it came to doing the videos, I just came up with a name for the YouTube channel, and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to podcasting, I suddenly thought, well, it's my voice that's going out there. And if you're going to be in people's ears and expect people to listen, whether in the car, on the train, or their commute, or some people listen to me in the shower, apparently, you've got to tell people who you are. And from a development point of view, a marketing point of view, and for all sorts of reasons, it's much more relevant and important to be genuine. So the first thing you've got to do is accept you're going to have to tell people who you are, and then your voice can be put to a name, and so it goes from there. And that develops a very intimate relationship with listeners, because they give you access to their time, and you give them access to your voice, and there'll always be the majority who don't get in contact. That's just the way life is. But there'll always be people who will respond to that and actually send you an email, or will respond to some of your requests. If you say, why don't you join us on the Facebook group or whatever, they'll come and join, and you'll end up in a dialogue. And in my case, I've met quite a few of my listeners on their vacations have agreed to catch up with me, and we've said hello or become friends.
Yeah, you have some friends that are from here in the U.S. that have visited a couple of times over there, and you've met them in person.
I've met three different parties have come over, and I've met up with them, and I've missed a fourth a couple of years ago. We tried to catch up a few times, but equally, I mean, people, I don't expect them to come through customs and meet me, you know.
Yeah.
They can arrive and do what they want, but some people, we just become so friendly through the process of the podcast that it's good fun to catch up and say hello. And it's always funny when they meet you, because they can see the podcast or hear the podcasting voice coming out of my lips, and it's a bit of a shock, you know.
Oh, that's what you look like.
Yeah, it's almost like, not that you're a celebrity, but they find it really funny.
Right.
And I've met strangers who've recognised me just from my voice.
Wow.
On campsites and things.
That's amazing. So that leads into the next question or subject matter: what creates longevity in a podcast? And I think you kind of touched on that too. It's by being real with your listeners.
Yeah, I mean, if you can share, get across your own commitment to your topic, your content, then you will definitely get a response from people. You will get feedback, and you will learn from them. If you've got a Facebook group, or if you've got a forum, or other ways that they want to share their point of view, you'll find that will stimulate further discussion, topics for content. They may well have expertise in related fields or in your own field that you feel you don't have, and everybody benefits from exchanging, you know, information. So it just develops. The issue, I'd say, for somebody starting out new is, you know, be wary that you're creating something that will have that momentum. And some people, I advise now, perhaps you want to think about creating a little series of podcasts so that you get a break. You know, I made not the mistake, but by just committing to a weekly podcast, you know, every week forever is quite a long time.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's it can be quite challenging to keep going. So the longevity in part is about, have you still got something to say? Is the content still there? And there's so many people who are coming in new to the podcast as well. It's a bit like if you get a magazine on a specialist subject, you'll always find little bits in the magazine for beginners. And you can always revisit the same content from a slightly different angle, or you can update the content because of the time since the last time. And so I think there's always content. There's always fresh content. As long as you've got the time, the capacity to do the podcast, then some of your listeners will come and go, but you'll have a group of listeners who will be regular, and they will expect the podcast, and they will enjoy it. And
so the key is to really, I think the key is to be passionate about your subject. And if you're passionate enough about the subject, you will find content ongoing. But I agree with something you said earlier too, which is it's good to think about what you're doing before, generally speaking, before you jump into it. And so it's the same with podcasting. Think about what your subject is, and how you want to get it out to the world, how often you want to get it out to the world. It sounds good to be rah, rah, rah in the beginning and say, I can do this on a weekly basis. But when you really think about it, you know, you can always grow into a week, an episode a week, but it's harder to step away from it, if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, and they use the term pod fading. You know,
Right.
somebody who has started a podcast and then stops or just has a break, and often it's unplanned, and then they don't come back for ages or not at all. So the idea of pod fading is actually the majority of podcasts. That's what happened. People go in with great enthusiasm, and it's you know, credit to yourself, Civilla. And I need to say this to people listening, is that there's a lot of time and effort on your part to put together the content, to think about it, to find the time to organise your thoughts, to do the recording, to then pass it to me to do the processing, the editing, the production. So it comes out as a free content on people's phones, but you need to be passionate and committed to put that time in on a regular basis to a podcast. You know, and that's where a lot of podcasters reach out to their listeners and say, you know, if you want to support the show, you can do it in various ways, whether it's become a patron or send a donation or join a membership site, or you know, there's various ways that you can just get some money to cover some of the basic costs. You know, your time cost is more difficult to take into account, but basic things like microphones and hosting fees and all this sort of stuff.
Exactly. And so I probably don't do it as often as I should, and probably not as often as other podcasters have because I listen to, like I mentioned on my Facebook Live not too long ago, I'm subscribed to 49 podcasts. And it's because I like the content. I love the podcasts that I'm listening to, but I'm also doing my homework on how they produce and their format. And so it's always good to learn from others because none of us knows everything. But I probably don't ask enough for assistance with producing the podcast. But I have 2 microphones now, and I know some people who have 10. You know, they have these great, huge, expensive setups, but I've been just biding my time and just making my way and watching to see what other people have and what makes other people sound good. But, you know, the podcast producing, you're right, it does take a lot of time. A lot of times, most of my episodes are produced at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning because I want quiet in the background, or except for that beep we're hearing every once in a while. Ignore the beep, you guys.
The beep every minute's my smoke detector, which needs a new battery, and I've ordered 2 new ones. But see, that's an example where there's a good chance I'll be able to remove that from the recording because it's a sound that I can identify in the software.
Right.
And the software may well be able to lift it completely from the recording. Might not, but I think it will.
Right.
So maybe if I just quickly tell you what the process is. When you send me that file over, I look at the background ambient noise on the entire file, and I attempt to remove that. And it depends on the quality of the file, whether it's been maybe a Skype conversation and there's other noise on the other side of the conversation from the guest. It can be more difficult. That's why we're using this Zencaster software, which records separately on each side. So anyway, I take some of the noise out. I do a little bit of other techniques in the software compression and normalization and various things. And that initial cleanup, and with you, because we know each other and you don't have a scripted podcast, very rare or occasional I do an edit for you. You know, normally you just do your show, and I don't have to go in and take anything out. Maybe the odd time. So I'll do whatever edit needs to be done. Some people's podcasts are full of edits because it's scripted and they want every and ah removed, and I'm not so keen on that. You know, sometimes less is more.
Right.
You don't really want to make it, you know, too perfect. So we do that basic processing side, and then in the editing, and then the production side is then making sure that it comes out. It goes into a final bit of software where I add the bumper music, and I make sure all the audio segments are at the appropriate volume level, and then I produce it as a final file in the format we want for iTunes and for your site, and I send it over to you. So that, because we're doing that on a regular basis, I've got that workflow down to under an hour, half an hour sometimes. So it works for both of us now because we know each other and we know what to expect.
Right, and workflow is the key, and it does take time. You're not going to have a workflow at the very beginning that makes any sense. It's just a matter of learning and figuring things out and being willing to make changes, which Well, that's for another subject for another day, because there have been countless changes that you've asked me to make that I just was not, as you say in Scotland, keen on. So it took a little while to get it done, but the changes have been great. But the process, speaking of the process, is basically, and everybody's process is different, but our basic process is you talk about your part of it, but my part is, yes, the recording portion. I record my process on my microphone, which is hooked into my laptop, and I wear earbuds or headphones so I can hear what's going on. And that's something that you've been, constantly teaching me how to do better. And then once I've recorded it, I upload it to my laptop to the hard drive and then send it to you via Dropbox. And then you do what you do on your end and you Dropbox it back to me, and I put it onto my podcast platform, my podcast onto Libsyn. So that's where, I have to pay for Libsyn every month. Again, talking about producing and microphones and paying for certain things. The content I'm putting out there is free, but I'm paying Libsyn every month so that I can have a place to post my podcast from and have it disseminated via places like iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, where else? All of these different places, Google Play Radio. And so this is definitely not complaining. This is something I would do for free. And so I am doing it for free. But that's where the passion for the subject matter that you're podcasting about comes in.
Yeah. And when I do it for other people, the workflow can be different. Some people I do the final post as well to their website. So another bit I do is right at the beginning and all the way through, I offer advice on equipment and things. And there's loads of upgrades and ways that you can grow into podcasting. And to get yourself up and running and into iTunes is probably the obvious place to be. That's the main platform for podcasters. I can do the whole submission to iTunes, that side of things as well. So I'm sort of there, almost hand-holding or coaching the whole way through as required, if you like, depending on the individual or the people I'm working with.
How did I forget iTunes? I forgot iTunes in my little list there. But yes, of course, iTunes. iTunes is the place to be as a podcaster. It's the biggest place to be. And so if anybody podcasting, iTunes is the first place you go to drop your podcast. But I am able to, I think in 2 years, I've learned so much that at least I don't have to have you drop the podcast for me. I mean, I'm sure that saves you time. But I enjoy it. I really enjoy writing the show notes that show up at the bottom of my podcast episodes. I enjoy recording. I enjoy hearing from people who have been helped and touched by a certain podcast episode. People inbox me. They don't always post it on social media for everyone to see. Sometimes I get direct messages, personal messages from people saying how much a certain episode has helped them, and people making suggestions. And so, yeah, I'm passionate about the subject matter and about the platform and about this medium called podcasting for sure.
Yeah. I think a key thing for me when I discovered podcasts was, I think you call it niching down, and we say a niche rather than niche or whatever. But the fact that if you have I like astronomy. So if I want to find out something about astronomy and I go to the television, if and when I can find something about astronomy, it's going to be pushed at a population of millions to make it appeal. So there's going to be very good photography and music, and the narrative will be good, but it won't go into any great detail necessarily. If I go into podcasts and I can pick up NASA scientists, I can pick up lecturers, I can pick up amateur astronomers, I can listen to all sorts of people. And the key thing when I think about podcasters is that the authenticity that they bring from their own perspective. They are genuine people, offer new content, often just because they're so committed to the content and they want to share it, that you can't get that anywhere else that I can think of. And you can't get into a topic as deeply as that unless you go specifically to a library, maybe even a university library, and get into something deep. You're not going to get it from the mainstream media, but you can get it through podcasting. And obviously there's a whole range of quality out there in terms of people are doing it for fun. Some people are doing it very, very professionally, even though they're doing it free. Some people are making enough to cover their costs and things. Right. So the quality varies, but in general, what you'll always find is people are excited by producing the podcast, and that authenticity is there, and that I can't find that commercially, if you like, in content. So there's something out there for most people, even if you're interested in. I mean, I don't watch mainstream TV, entertainment, celebrities, and stuff. There's podcasts about all of those things as well. Podcasts on almost every subject you can imagine.
That's what I was just thinking, and that's a great point that you make, because NASA has a podcast. Isn't it called NASAcast?
Yeah, there's quite a few,
Yeah.
and there's dozens and dozens of astronomy and science podcasts, hundreds of them.
Right. So you're right. There is authenticity because people are taking the time to make sure that they know what they're talking about. And we all make mistakes, but people are really putting in the extra effort to be authentic about their voice and about their subject matter. So that is a great point that you brought up. So as we wind things down here, how can people reach you for assistance with their podcast or website, or just to listen to your podcast?
If they wanted to listen to my podcast, it's called Passing Places. And one of the things, just to go back to traveling, if you like, for a second, a question that almost inevitably people ask when they first meet you is, where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways that bursts my balloon, because traveling is about the process, the doing of the traveling, if you like. It's the moment of travel. It's not the arrival. It's better to travel than to arrive. I can't remember the exact quote, but it is better to travel than to arrive. So when I called my podcast Passing Places, it was partly an acknowledgement that you will pass places as you travel. But there's also in Scotland these little roads. When you get to the more remote areas, the roads are only 1 car width. So to allow people to get past, they have little laybys where you pull in, and we call them passing places. So again, it was a play on words, but it really is the whole idea of travel. So in telling you, I've totally forgotten what you asked me, Civilla.
How can people? How can people?
How can they find? So passing places was the answer to the question. Well, I knew there was a question.
It was answer to the second question, but which is how do they listen to your podcast? Which
so passing. If you type in Passing Places into Google, Passing Places podcast, you'll find me. But the actual web address is bonnietours.com, which was a temporary URL that I've continued to use. It was a reference to, I had a Triumph Bonneville for a number of years, which is a motorcycle. And if you have a Triumph Bonneville, you call it a Bonnie. And I worked in Scotland for Scotland. People talk about Bonnie Scotland in terms of it being beautiful. So Bonnie Tours was a play on words as well. But so bonnietours.com to find the podcast. Or if you go into your iTunes on your phone, into your podcasting app, or whatever app you use on your phone, if you've got an Android, or even on the web or whatever, just type in Passing Places and you'll find me. I'm in the travel section, but you'll find it pretty quickly. Even if you just type in Scotland, you'll find the podcast.
That's a big deal. I mean, when you type in Scotland and you find your podcast, I think that's a pretty big deal. So that's great. And then as far as people who may need assistance with podcast production or web building?
Well, I've got a website. My little company's called Alba, which is Gaelic for Scotland. Alba, ALBA, albadigitalmedia.com. And I can be contacted through albadigitalmedia.com as well. And really what I'm offering people is and it's a similar thing with web design, I can build your website in terms of what you need, but also show you the whole way through so that you're left confident that you can manage the content going forward yourself. Or if you're busy and you've got other fish to fry, I can manage the maintenance of the site and update pages for you and all sorts of things. So it just depends on the individual, and that's true of podcasting. Some people, they want the assistants to get up and running and then they're away. They love the whole process of producing the podcast the whole way through. So I can get them up to speed and they can head off and do it on their own. It really depends on the individual. So
okay, so you're available for all varies of experience when it comes to the podcasting and with the web building and maintenance side.
Yeah, and when you get to where you're at now, Civilla, your podcast is all about the content and the listeners, and behind the scenes, you and I can still maintain discussions about how to improve your website, how to improve your audio. There's all sorts of support ongoing behind that. But the main thing is to get people up and running and get their show out to a good enough standard that there's not audio problems. Because that's the one thing that can spoil a podcast is where the audio is really difficult to listen to. I mean, I wouldn't say you or I are podcasting snobs, but if you're a regular podcast listener as well as a producer, but when you listen to podcasts, your ears are a bit like your eyes. They get tired with poor audio. And if one person talking is at a totally different volume and type of audio in terms of background noise from the other, and you're driving along in your car and you haven't changed the volume control to listen to the quiet one, turn it down to listen to the loud one, or, various things can put you right off a podcast, even though you really want to hear the content.
Right.
So you just get over that initial quality line that it's good enough, and then you can continue to improve it from there.
Right. Just keep improving, keep growing, and, don't be afraid to improve and to grow.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Well, I've got to acknowledge the commitment that you've made. I mean, you talked about the 2-year anniversary. I think I said to you from the outset that it can take 18 months plus to get that traction.
Right.
And I think you're seeing, certainly through your listeners and the feedback and things like your Facebook group, that you're getting a community of interest and people are contributing content and supporting each other, and you're getting feedback that all that effort you're putting in is worthwhile, and it's appreciated and it's having an impact. And that's a key thing for podcasters, is that there's no quick fix. You don't put your audio out there and 3 weeks later you're on television. It's not going to happen.
It's true. It's very true, but it's not easy. Nothing about this last 2 years was easy, but it's so worth it. And again, it comes down to the passion, the level of passion you have for your platform and for your message. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm going to go ahead and put Kevin's contact information, both the Alba Digital Media link if you want help with your website and or a podcast, and also the link to his podcast, Passing Places, so that you can catch up with him. And of course, my information will be in the show notes as well. And Kevin, I want to thank you once again for your patience with me the last couple of years with podcasting, and also with your podcast. And hey, thank you for the other people that you work with as well. You have a lot of, I'm sure, very happy customers. So thank you for all that you do.
Well, we can do this again on the 5th anniversary.
5th anniversary. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's a plan. And I didn't say at the start, Civilla, that I was just thinking in the minutes before you got in touch there when we started. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever been a guest on a podcast before.
Oh wow! Okay, cool.
So it's that's quite a useful experience as well, because it's a little bit nerve-wracking. Actually, it's much more easier when you're in control.
Yeah, exactly. And as podcasters, we tend to be in control. As quote unquote business owners, podcasters, people running a platform, entrepreneurs, we tend to be in control anyway. So yeah, it is kind of difficult. And in fact, when we were just getting this recording started, we had a couple of issues with with things that we should find simple, and things we tell our guests that we want done to have a good episode. But we were kind of struggling there for a minute in the beginning.
Yeah.
So that was kind of funny and humbling and all of that mixed in together.
I'll edit that bit out, obviously. So.
Of course. Nobody's going to hear that. Nobody's going to hear that at all. But before we go, though, I do want to give one shout out to I want to read a quick email that I got from someone. She says that based on this is July, so it may have been the May episode or the May newsletter that she read. And based on what she read in the May newsletter, this was her email to me. She says, "Wow, that was so brutally honest. Hats off to you for opening up yourself to others like that. That is why God is using you so powerfully. Of course, I have no answers for your questions. I am not in the same boat like you, but in a similar situation of sometimes feeling, how can I say so and say when I am not even there myself? You are needed. You are not a fraud. You are simply doing God's will. Keep on doing what you are doing. Love, Olive." And I will admit, Olive is a family member. She's a family member by marriage, but she's been so supportive, and I always love when I hear from her. So this was an awesome email that I just had to share with you. So thank you very much for all of your words of encouragement, Olive. I really appreciate that.
That's really good. It just reminds me as well of one thing, Civilla, sorry to cut across
No
you, but
problem.
if I could maybe say to anybody who's listening that the thing that tickled me most, or I found the most satisfying in podcasting, was what's it called, our SpeakPipe
Oh, yeah.
voicemail service. If I put it simply, when you talk to a microphone, you're talking to a bit of a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get that voicemail, I know there's a SpeakPipe service on your website. If somebody goes to your website and presses that red button, I think it is, you can practice your message to Civilla. You can say anything you like, play it back. If you don't like it, delete it and try again.
Mm-hmm.
But see, as a podcaster, when a voice comes back, an actual recorded voice comes back, it's a bit like you sent a voice and they sent a voice back. It doesn't get better than
Nothing.
that. Maybe apart from actually meeting the person. When you meet somebody who's listened to the show is an amazing thing as well. But if there's anybody out there that could, it's almost like a call to action, but if they could go onto your website and try that SpeakPipe.
But you're absolutely right. There is nothing like hearing back from somebody because, like you said earlier, there are a lot of people who are listening who may never say anything, but it's those few people who reach out that really, really help keep you going and help encourage you.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people who very, very rarely would consider getting in touch with somebody who produces a podcast. It's amazing. I mean, it's just normal human behavior, but the people that do either want to do it or feel the need to do it, you've got all the things there that they can use. But if anybody just has a think for a second, it's amazing the impact it has on the podcaster when somebody actually gets in touch.
Right, they feel compelled.
With some feedback.
Right. And I don't know.
I mean, it really is.
I don't know how you could possibly say that the button is red when you know about our 2-year conversation about the color purple.
I know it's shades of purple, the whole website, but when you actually press the whatever the first purple part is, the actual SpeakPipe interface, I think there's a red button on the record thing.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
So we're both right.
Okay. Okay. Well, Kevin, thank you.
I might cut that out as well. So.
Well, you know what? Speaking of that, I know you're the one that's going to be in control of the editing and recording. So we might have a little battle about what to cut out and what not to cut out. Yeah. But that's what this is all about. So it's always good when you have a great friendship with your podcast producer and that they can almost figure out what you want out and what you want in. Because you've also built a friendship along with, of course, the professionalism of producing somebody else's podcast. So this is an awesome friendship, and I really appreciate it. This is a God thing, because I don't know if I said this on air before, but there was a point in this whole platform when I sat down and I literally said, God, please send me somebody to help me because I don't know what I don't know. Those were the words that I spoke. And not long after, the answer was meeting you on the now defunct platform called Blab, which was a video interface platform where people from all over the world got together just to chit-chat in different quote-unquote rooms based on subject matter. And so that's how we met. And not long after, I asked you to produce my podcast. So it's amazing how God answers prayers, and here we are now. So anyway, thanks again, Kevin. It's been an honor and a pleasure to chat with you today. And
thanks for inviting me on. I've enjoyed it.
No problem. And thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye. Well, hello, everybody. Civilla Morgan here. Welcome back to another episode of 21st Century Hannah, where my mission is to speak to and encourage the childless, not by choice women and men around the world. Thank you for stopping by for another episode of Childless, Not by Choice. I'm going to stop. Did I just mess that up?
I don't think so.
I said 21st Century Hannah.
Right. Okay. Now, just what to do is don't stop. Just give it another 10 seconds silence and I'll see it on the tape.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for visiting another episode of Childless Not by Choice. I appreciate your taking the time to stop by and listen in once again. Thank you to my repeat listeners, and if you're new, listening for the first time, thanks for stopping by. It is greatly appreciated. As you know, what in the world? What is happening here?
You just get extra pressure.